91 years. That's how long I've been carrying this. April 1942. The war was 4 months old, and America was still bleeding from what happened at Pearl Harbor. Nobody knew yet if we were going to survive it. Nobody. Not the generals, not the president, certainly not me, a 20-year-old kid from rural Indiana who'd never been farther from home than the next county over. But I got sent somewhere, and what happened there, what my team and I did in those mountains, nobody ever officially wrote it down. Because missions like ours back then, they didn't write those down. That's why I'm telling you now, before it disappears with me. My name is Walter Greer. I was born in 1934. No, wait. Let me do that right. I was born in 1931 in a small town in southern Ohio called Waverly. Population maybe 3,000. 1 diner, 2 churches, a hardware store my father ran until his knees gave out. I enlisted in early 1942. I was 20 years old, and I want you to understand what 20 felt like back then. We didn't have the luxury of figuring ourselves out. The world didn't allow for that. Pearl Harbor happened, and overnight, everything changed. The diner put up a map on the wall. The preacher started every sermon with a prayer for the boys going over. And boys like me, we stopped being boys pretty quickly. I got assigned to a signals intelligence unit. Fancy way of saying I learned to listen, to intercept, to understand what the enemy was saying before they said it out loud in the form of bullets. I was good at it. Unnaturally good, my commanding officer said. He didn't mean it as a compliment. He meant it as a reason to send me somewhere dangerous. Before I tell you what happened in April of 1942, I need you to understand who I was before all of it. Because the boy who went in and the man who came out, they shared a face, but not much else. I grew up working, not the kind of work kids today call hard. Real work. Up before the sun, hauling feed, fixing fence lines with my father and my brother Tom. Tom was 18 months older than me, built like a wall. Laughed like everything was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. Tom enlisted 6 weeks before I did. Marines. He went to the Pacific. I went a different direction. We said goodbye on a Tuesday morning outside the Waverly bus depot. He punched me on the shoulder and said, "Don't do anything stupid." I told him the same. He laughed. That big, stupid laugh of his. I didn't know it then. How could I? But that was the last time I'd ever hear it. I spent 8 months in training before they told me what I was actually going to do. Signals, interception, radio communications. I sat in a room for weeks with headphones clamped to my ears, learning to pull enemy transmissions out of static, to decode patterns, to understand silence as much as sound. You know what I learned in those 8 months? I learned that war is mostly waiting, and the waiting is almost worse than what comes after it. Because in the waiting, your imagination does things to you that the enemy never could. April 3rd, 1942. 4 months almost to the day after Pearl Harbor. They briefed us in a room with no windows. 3 officers I'd never seen before. Maps on a table covered in markers I didn't fully understand. My team. Myself, a man named Curtis Boland from Georgia, a man named Darnell Price from Chicago, and our team lead, Sergeant Ray Moffett, the toughest, quietest man I have ever known in my life. The mission was simple in the way that all dangerous things sound simple when someone else explains them to you. We were going in to intercept and decode a Japanese communications relay that intelligence believed was coordinating supply routes across 3 island chains. The information coming through that relay was directing Japanese naval movements. If we could get in close enough, listen long enough, and transmit what we learned, we could give our commanders something they desperately needed. "How close?" Ray asked. The officer looked at him for a long moment. "Close. We were dropped at night. I won't tell you where exactly, because even now some of that is complicated. But I'll tell you what I remember feeling when I hit the ground. The air was thick, like breathing through a wet cloth. The smell was something I had no name for, green and rotting and alive all at once. The sounds, Lord, the sounds. things moving in the dark that I told myself were animals. For 3 days, we moved through terrain that seemed designed specifically to kill you before the enemy ever got the chance. Heat that sat on your chest like a stone. Rain that came sideways. Insects that treated your skin like a meal. Curtis kept saying, "This is not what I signed up for." He said it so many times it stopped meaning anything. It became almost like a prayer. On the evening of the 3rd day, we found the relay point, and that's when everything stopped being a mission. We were set up behind a ridge, maybe 200 yards from the relay station, close enough that I could see the glow of their equipment through the trees. I had my headset on. I was pulling in transmissions, scribbling as fast as my hand would move. And I knew within 10 minutes that what I was hearing was bigger than anyone had anticipated. Ship positions, supply routes, something that sounded like coordinates for a movement we absolutely could not let happen. I told Ray. He looked at my notes. He looked at me. He said quietly, "You sure?" "I'm sure, Ray." "How long to encode and transmit?" 20 minutes, maybe 25. He looked out toward the relay station, then back at me. "Then you've got 20 minutes. What I didn't know, what none of us knew yet, was that we'd already been spotted. Not by the relay station, by a patrol that had circled around behind us. Darnell saw them first. He didn't say a word. He just put his hand on Curtis's arm, slow and deliberate, and nodded his head in a direction that made my stomach drop. 8 of them, moving carefully. 40 yards back and closing. Ray made the call in about 3 seconds flat. He looked at Darnell and Curtis, then back at me. "You keep writing. You keep transmitting. No matter what happens, you do not stop until that message is sent. Understood?" I understood. "I want you to know what it felt like to sit there with those headphones on and keep writing, while the men who were protecting you did what they had to do behind you." My hands were moving. My ears were working. My eyes were on those notes, and I could hear everything else. I cannot describe to you fully what those 12 minutes cost. I will only tell you this. Curtis Boland from Georgia never made it home. He died on that ridge at 22 years old, buying me the time I needed. I sent the message. Complete. Confirmed received. When Ray came back to me, he had a cut across his cheek that needed stitches it would never get. He crouched down beside me. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Did it go?" "It went." He nodded once, stood up, said, "Then let's go home." I left something on that ridge. I don't have a name for it exactly. Innocence sounds too soft. Whatever it was, I've never gotten it back. We made extraction 2 days later. Curtis's body came home 3 months after that. I attended the funeral in Augusta, Georgia. His mother shook my hand and said, "He talked about you in his letters." I didn't know what to say to her. I still don't. What we transmitted from that ridge, what I intercepted and encoded and sent while Curtis was dying, contributed directly to intelligence that shaped the positioning of American forces at the Battle of the Coral Sea. May 1942. You can look it up. It's in the history books now, though my name certainly isn't. I came home in 1945, 3 years later than I expected and a lifetime older. I went back to Waverly. The diner was still there. The hardware store was still there. My father was older, smaller somehow, like the war had shrunk him too, even though he never left Ohio. Tom came home. Thank God Tom came home. He never talked about what he saw in the Pacific, and I never talked about the ridge. And somehow that shared silence held us together better than any words could have. I married a woman named Dorothy, built a house, raised 2 kids, worked 30 years at a paper mill. A completely ordinary life from the outside. I'm 91 years old. I don't tell you this story so you'll think I'm a hero. I want to be clear about that. Curtis Boland was the hero. Ray Moffett was the hero. Darnell Price, who carried a wound he never mentioned until 3 days after we got back, he was the hero. I was just the man with the headphones, doing the one specific thing I happen to know how to do, at the one specific moment it needed doing. But I think that's the lesson. I really do. You don't have to be the bravest person in the room. You don't have to be the strongest or the most prepared. You just have to keep doing your job when everything around you is telling you to stop. When it's loud, when it's terrifying, when the people you love are in danger and you don't know if any of it is going to matter. You keep writing. You keep transmitting. You trust that the message will reach someone who needs it. I needed to tell you this before I'm gone. Now you know.